Hello and welcome to Basspick Reviews, and in today's episode I'll be doing my final thoughts on Black Swan. So, let's get started. If you see any review of this movie, they always talk about it's a story of growing up, and I could not agree more. It honestly is a true story about this young woman who was growing up, and I love how it's so subtle about it as well. Like, there's a lot of pink that's constantly surrounding her, and even in the dance scenes, like when it's her with everyone else around her, she is the only one wearing pink. Like, she's got like a pink leotard or something like that. Everyone else is wearing black or grey. So it's real contrast to see her and then to see the dark, gritty world that's surrounding her that she's slowly trying to poke through. And the other thing that's really good, it's very obvious that she was sheltered for a long time, so when people call her names or when she is having to deal with a conflict, she instantly kind of shuts down and doesn't know how to react. That's why, in all honesty, they were really hard to watch, but I loved the scenes when they were kind of being mean to her, when they were saying to her, stop being so weak, you know, stop doing this, stop doing that. And you could see that she was struggling with it because she obviously hasn't been told that. She's obviously been told, you know, you're so strong, you're so amazing, you're beautiful, this kind of stuff. So when she gets told the opposite, she doesn't really know how to react. Heck, even her mother kind of goes back at her a little bit when she doesn't want a huge slice of cake and her mother is going to throw it out, and she just instantly starts going, no, I'm really sorry, I didn't mean that, yada yada yada, and makes her mum kind of stop. So you can really tell that this woman is kind of terrified of other people and just wants to please everyone, and when she can't do it, she doesn't know how to react. So I really like how not only is it a growing up tale, it's her kind of realizing that it's almost like it's okay to say no, and it's okay to let her inner Black Swan come out and say, no, it's like, I'm not going to do this kind of thing. The other thing I really liked, which really got nothing to do with growing up, it's got more to do with the whole like Black Swan kind of aspect, was that she would see glimpses of her bad self. Like, it was even from the start when she had to walk down that kind of dark alleyway and she saw herself. When she was making out with Mila Kunis at one point and she saw herself, when she was getting fitted for something and she was seeing everyone just kind of turn on her and all this kind of stuff, you could really tell that this poor woman is struggling with this Black Swan character and is letting it out too fast instead of slowly. So she's transitioning from a girl to a woman, but it's such a fast transition that it's happening all at once for her and she can't deal with it. Therefore, she just shuts down. I will have to say that at the end, a bit of a spoiler here, I'm not entirely sure if she actually dies or not because there's like glass in her, so I don't know if she dies or not. The other thing I want to talk about is the fact that I can really imagine this is how a ballerina would feel. Granted, I'm not a ballerina, I don't know anyone who is a ballerina, but I have seen like Dance Academy and all that kind of stuff, and it's so evident in each of these shows that show these characters. I would genuinely hope that real ballerinas aren't really like that because they're constantly obsessed with perfection. And now this is coming from someone who's a guitar player who also, what up, subtle kind of messaging, but I'm a guitar player, so I'm also kind of constantly looking at technique, looking at perfecting it and all that kind of stuff, to the point where if it makes a noise I don't like, I will do my best to try to not make that noise anymore, even though it's almost impossible. I can only imagine what it would be like for a dancer because they will stretch and make their bodies, but it's to the point where it's almost going to be unnatural, and that's why, a bit of a sidetrack, but that's why I loved how in particular like Dance Academy, where they dealt with other issues, not just them being dancers, but how dancing can affect them. Like when Abigail developed the eating disorder because she thought she was too like fat to be a dancer, if that makes sense, and she was just constantly working her body to the point where she just shut down. So bit sidetracked there, but I can imagine that's what ballerinas would go through. And in Black Swan, that's what they show. They show Nina constantly stretching, constantly strengthening, constantly practicing, trying to almost work her body until it can't work anymore, and then working it some more. So I really like how it also kind of delves into the ballerina kind of mindset, because I'd imagine that's what some of them would be like, but I genuinely hope that none of them are actually like that, because that's too intense, I'd imagine. But I think it's good. And you can't really talk about this movie without talking about one glaring aspect, which is the lesbian scene. And in all honesty, the thing that annoys me the most about this movie, and it kind of annoys a lot of other people who like this movie, is the fact that when people think of Black Swan, they don't think of like the psychological aspect, they don't think of like the growing up, they don't think of any of that. They think of Mila Kunis and Natalie Portman going at it kind of thing. But in all honesty, from watching only scenes of the Black Swan and not watching the whole movie as a whole until yesterday, the scene is not as sexy as what people would imagine. It's really not. In fact, it's a more, oh god, please make it stop. And I'm not saying that because like I'm against that kind of thing. What I mean is, hey, continuity, the door's now open, so I do apologize. But as I was saying, the scene is not as sexy as you would imagine because, a bit of a spoiler, it's not real. She wakes up and realizes it never actually happened. It was her exploring her sexuality and exploring stuff that normally people do when they're like teenagers to 20s, and then that kind of all stops. But it's her exploring that, and the music that's surrounding it doesn't help either. Like, it's really not, I think it's really not as sexy as what people imagine. And the fact that when Mila Kunis is like, you know, going down on Natalie Portman and she sees herself, that's even more jarring because you're like, holy crap, what's actually happening? This girl's actually going insane. So you can't really talk about this movie without mentioning that, but I think that a lot of people assume that because Natalie Portman and Mila Kunis are fairly attractive women, they think it's like going to be the hottest thing ever, but it's really not. In fact, it's creepy. In fact, it's, when I say unnatural, what I mean, it's unnatural for her character to start to do that until she slowly starts to break out of this kind of state she's in. I'm not saying it's unnatural for lesbians, I'm not saying that, but it's really creepy, and I wish people would kind of watch the movie first and then watch that scene, because if you just watch the lesbian scene alone, people would probably assume it is sexy, but if you put it in context, it's really not. It's really actually terrifying, just because you're like, the music's not helping, and with everything else that's already happened, it's just kind of like, what the actual hell. But then again, this is just my opinion. Art is subjective, so don't be too protective. Basspick out. People talking in my videos though. Again.